Hello and welcome to another video questions and answer session with me, JMBal404. And today's question is not one I was asked, but more of a debate that's going on today. Now, in the industry, computer industry, and the AV industry, we have two connections. DisplayPort for the computer industry and HDMI for the AV industry. These two compete. Now, they've been competing for some time. They're both digital connections. DVI upgrades into HDMI but not into DisplayPort. So in effect HDMI is based off DVI. DisplayPort on the other hand is a completely new standard and features some disadvantages and some advantages. We're going to have a look at both of these ports and decide which one is actually the better port. Well, first of all, let's look at the DisplayPort connector. It's a nice V shape, and it's much nicer than HDMI where it goes into the monitor. It slots in very nicely. So HDMI looks like DisplayPort, except it's got two grooves instead of one. So why would you choose DisplayPort over HDMI? Well, DisplayPort is royalty free. This means that you don't pay anything to have a DisplayPort on the monitor. So my monitor features DisplayPort. So it might have been £20 cheaper, or maybe 30, 40, than a HDMI version of it. That's because they have to pay royalty fees to the HDMI working group. So this provides the consumer with the advantage that it comes cheaper than a HDMI device. Having said that, HDMI is not that expensive. It costs £10,000 for the companies to manufacture for a year, and it's something like 20 cents per device. The other main advantage of DisplayPort is that it allows thinner monitors. Because DisplayPort is native to the monitors, it requires no conversion. Both these connections are digital, so there are no advantages between either of them. However, DisplayPort also features 10.8 gigabits per second on just the standard connector. Due to the fact there are no royalty fees, you don't pay anything to get a premium connector. HDMI, on the other hand, you have to pay to get that premium connector that will give you 10.8 gigabits per second. Possibly the biggest advantage of HDMI over DisplayPort is the fact that it features HDCP natively. So what is HDCP? Well, it's high definition protection. It stands for high bandwidth digital content protection. It's to protect high bandwidth, basically, or high definition in most cases, content from people who can steal the information being sent down. It's basically a trust circle. It was developed by Intel, and it sends an encryption key down to the monitor, which is the only device that will be able to crack that key, basically. And the purpose of this is you can send Blu-ray information without it being cracked by a third-party device. So it's a trust circle. Without HDCP, you can't send information. So it's important to have. Now with my monitor, I have tried my Blu-ray ROM, and I cannot get it to show any Blu-ray through DisplayPort. So I've opted to use DVI again. I've moved back from DisplayPort back to DVI. It's not that I don't like DisplayPort. DisplayPort is a brilliant connector, but just not without HDCP. It is an option on DisplayPort. Now the second main advantage of HDMI will really bring it to the AV market as opposed to the computer market, but it's the fact that it natively supports audio across it, up to 7.1 channels, 8 channels. So this is a major advantage in most cases. Computer monitors not so much, because they only have stereo speakers and it's not that much harder to connect an audio cable as well, and the fact that most monitors don't actually feature speakers also brings that to an advantage. Also a major advantage is the fact that unlike DisplayPort, HDMI can also feature the XVYCC color space. Now, I'm not completely familiar with this, but I know this is an improved color space over what you've got right now. It's completely an improvement over RGB, and DisplayPort doesn't feature it. So some people will understand this, and they'll understand it's a really big disadvantage. I know that currently it uses YPBPR, or CR and CB. Also HDMI does feature that DisplayPort doesn't feature is Consumer Electronics Control, CEC. Now this is basically a signal that can be sent down the connector that allows it to control the devices. So if you turn off your Blu-ray ROM or your Blu-ray player on your TV, it will turn the TV off as well, or if you turn the TV off, it will turn the Blu-ray player off, whatever way you've got to set up. Anynet, for instance, on Samsung TVs, or VeraLink on Panasonic TVs, they all use the CEC channel on the HDMI connector. Also, one of the main disadvantages with DisplayPort is that it doesn't feature the backward compatibility electrically with DVI. You can use an adapter, yes, but it's not electrically compatible, which can really hinder its performance. It means there's a slight conversion going on, and conversion obviously puts more on the CPU. It slows the process down, and all these different disadvantages to conversion. So, in essence, DisplayPort actually has more disadvantages than HDMI, but it's still the computer market's performer. It's still designed for the computer market. So my conclusion, well, it's a really tough war between these two connectors. On the left you've always got DisplayPort, on the right you've got HDMI. HDMI is slightly older than DisplayPort, but DisplayPort is our connector. It belongs to the computer market, not to the AV market, whereas HDMI was designed for the AV market, not for my market. I mean, come on, you've got to choose DisplayPort over HDMI if you're using a computer monitor. You don't pay as much for it, first of all, and second of all, it can do things like USB across it, etc. HDMI can do this as well, but DisplayPort will support this very soon, whereas HDMI is going to take so much longer to support this because it's not designed for the computer market. Although HDMI features audio, which I'd like to have seen on my monitor, but it doesn't have built-in speakers, so we can sort of see this, I still feel that HDMI is let down by the fact that it's more expensive. It requires a premium connector or a higher version in order for you to get the higher bandwidth, and by the fact that its connector doesn't feature any wee pins to stick out into the connector to hold it in. Now, I'm still a DVI guy because DVI is the big clunky connector which has screws on the side, just like VGA, the D-sub, that I like because it means it doesn't fall out my monitor when I rotate my monitor. So DVI is still my connector of choice, and DVI is directly compatible with HDMI, so to be honest, HDMI would be the successor to my DVI connector had I the option, but I'm sticking with DVI because DVI is a good connector. It's a solid connector. It's been around for so long, 1999 it was developed, and it's performed well all this time. So my conclusion is go with DisplayPort if you really have the choice between it and HDMI, but don't expect to play Blu-ray movies, etc. on it. So thanks for watching my video. Please comment and rate. Thanks.